Next week, India and Europe, representing a quarter of the global economy, are expected to announce the mother of all trade deals. For decades, India shunned these agreements, but now it's racing to sign them, pivoting sharply toward developed economies and away from China. This isn't just about tariffs, it's about reshaping supply chains and answering a critical question: where does India stand in a fragmenting world? Let's dive in to find out why we all should care about India's new free trade agreement with the EU. And welcome once again to Why Should We Care About the Indo-Pacific? Brought to you by our producer, IEJ Media, and our sponsor, BowerGroupAsia. We will tell you more about them in due course, although you'll actually learn quite a bit more about BowerGroupAsia today. I am the former military officer, Ray Powell. I'm here in California. And of course, down there in Arizona is the former diplomat, Jim Caruso. How are you, Jim?
I don't know about being called down there in Arizona. I'm just in Arizona.
You are down south, my friend.
I guess I am. Well, even further south, or at least further east or west, depending how you go, is the managing director of Bauer Group India, Anuj Gupta. Anuj, welcome.
Thank you. Delighted to be.
Anuj was a chief of staff to the Indian Commerce Minister. He worked for Tata Group in public policy. So he has broad background in commercial issues and trade issues, both the private sector and the government sector. And what's coming, I understand, is a trade agreement between EU and India. As someone who did some trade talks with India, I know how difficult it can be to come to an agreement. But for our audience around the world, why should any of us care about a EU-India trade agreement?
I think I'll make 3 points over here. Number one, the deal covers a quarter of world's GDP. So it's a big deal. It's a deal which will impact every other country in the world, and of course, EU and India deeply. Secondly, the deal is about diversification, diversification away from the great powers, as they like to be called. It's a golden opportunity for EU to showcase that they have other options. They have huge trading partners they can count on. As Ursula mentioned, that this is mother of all deals, and EU companies will get access as a first mover in a huge to a huge market in the world. And lastly, I think the deal will break new frontiers in terms of what a deal with EU can be. It will cover a lot of non-tariff issues and will cover them in a very, very interesting manner, which other deals can follow after this. So, for example, there are issues around labor, environment. There is something called CBAM, which is an environment-related measure by EU. How are these handled in the deal would be looked at and emulated after this.
Anuj, India does not have a prolific trading history especially when it comes to opening its own market. Why is that, and what has changed so that all of a sudden it's looking at this big free trade agreement?
So I would say definitely, I mean, if you look at India's history, it's all about trade. And then of course, for about 2 centuries, it closed down. And there was a certain, I would say, exploitation of the trade dynamics with India, which led Indians to look inwards and become suspicious of trade. Trade became a bad word till a few years back. And some of the trade agreements which India signed early on were also not very, very favorable. So let me just give you one example. India signed the ASEAN Free Trade Agreement, and India's per capita GDP is right now it's half of Vietnam. It's much lower than Indonesia. And typically, whenever a country has higher GDP per capita, then it opens up more compared to a country which has lower. But Vietnam actually opened up less than India. Indonesia only opened up 50% of its tariff lines as opposed to 74% for India. So some of the deals India signed up were not very favorable to it, so which is why India closed down. When the Modi government came into power, they very consciously decided that they will look at advanced economies to partner with and do free trade agreements because there was a certain complementary nature between technology brought in by advanced economies and the labor advantage India can provide to that technology and manufacturing in India. So, which is why India has now signed a series of free trade agreements, including, your audience may be interested in knowing the fastest free trade agreement signed ever in the world, which is 88 days from starting of the negotiation to signing, is actually signed by India with UAE. The second fastest in the world, again, is signed by India with Australia. So India is in a hurry to sign a
Well,
lot of the deals.
well, I would say the India Australia was signed quickly, but it's been discussion for years. But what I'm curious about is India has backed away from the large multilateral agreements like CPTPP or the RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, in favor of these more bilateral agreements. Is that a conscious policy?
Yeah. No, I think if you look at RCEP, you know, strategically, India had or has free trade agreements with every single member of RCEP except China. And India was very clear that they were not looking at an FTA with China. And RCEP effectively was one such agreement. There were a number of other technical reasons around it. So, for example, when they were signing RCEP in 2020 and 2019, the base year for RCEP was in 2014. So the tariffs would have been set back by 6 years just by signing their agreement. And India had made a lot of tweaks around tariffs since 2014. So there were a number of issues around RCEP from a technical perspective, but the overall perspective was that we don't want to sign a quasi FTA with China just for getting deals done with other members of RCEP. So, which is why India, after it left RCEP, signed a deal with Australia, signed a deal with New Zealand. It already had FTAs with Japan and Korea and ASEAN. So, it actually covers the RCEP world. India is not cut off from multilateral deals as effectively the EU deal also shows, but it's looking at equal contribution to the FTA for every partner.
And why doesn't India want an FTA with China?
Uh, I think Donald Trump will be in the best position to answer that. It's pretty evident to the world. There is significant amount of subsidization of trade from China. There are large moves towards dumping from China. There are quality issues because of trade with China. And there are, of course, strategic issues, defense and security issues with China between India and China. So, because of all these issues, India is not looking at an FTA with China.
So the other big partner not mentioned, of course, is the United States. And US and India have been talking about an FTA for months now. Where does that stand, and what do you think the outlook is?
I think the outlook is very positive. Now, if you look at the agreement which is being discussed, I would say it is actually one of the longest trade discussions in the world because the discussion really started in 2019 under Ambassador Lighthizer. If you remember way back, there was a trade agreement being discussed. In fact, by the end of Trump 1.0, There was a deal on the table which could have been signed, but India said "Well, it's probably too late into the life of the administration and it's a lame duck administration, so we'll not sign that." But now the negotiations have progressed well. There are, of course, expectations around India following American regulations. There are expectations around the agricultural sector, which India is very sensitive towards. So there are some things which are pending in the negotiations. But Ambassador Greer, for example, is on record to say that what India has given, it has never done that in the past. I would say the deal is right now. India has given whatever it could. The deal is in the hands of US and President Trump now, and let's see. We are hoping for a early conclusion on that.
Anuj, because you have worked inside the belly of the beast, as it were, inside the Indian government on these issues, how hard is it to get these deals, especially when you talk about things like, you know, market access and imposing new regulations on India? How hard is it to get these things through the Indian government, through the Indian bureaucracy, so that you can actually get to these deals in the end?
Yeah. So as I was mentioning, India has signed the fastest deals in the FTA world. India has signed a very large number of deals over the last few years. So Indian bureaucracy was traditionally seen as very obstructive towards these kind of deals. The way Indian government has approached this is to lay down what is non-negotiable upfront. What are the sensitivities are identified upfront and told to the partner that this is what we cannot do at all, but let's discuss all the other things which we can do. So, for example, the India-New Zealand FTA. It's the first FTA which New Zealand has signed, which does not include dairy from New Zealand to the partner country. So India was very clear that dairy sector is very sensitive in India. It will not be part of the deal, and New Zealand understood that. And then they worked out a package which was then ultimately beneficial to New Zealand as well as India. So I think that approach has worked really well.
So, are you seeing foreign companies take advantage of these FTAs that are coming fast and furious? Is there more foreign direct investment coming in? Is there more outbound investment from Indian companies as a result of these trade agreements?
Uh, I would say yes to all of these. If you look at FDI, we had over the last from since April, India received $51 billion in FDI, which is a significant uptick from what it got the year before. In fact, you would be interested in knowing the Indian FTAs now are actually about FTAs and FDI. So it's a double F agreement. So, for example, the deal with with EFTA. FTA includes a provision.
Sorry, I just want to EFTA. Can you explain what that is?
EFTA is a bloc of countries in Europe, which includes Switzerland, Norway, etc. And the FTA with EFTA basically says that $100 billion will be invested by EFTA into India. The deal with New Zealand says that $20 billion will be invested by New Zealand into India. So these deals are a combination of trade and investment. And FDI has reached record numbers. If you look at the export numbers for India, December, for which the last month for which data is available, the India's exports were the highest in the decade, and that is the state for a couple of months. So every month, India is setting a new record in exports, and that is despite having 50% tariffs imposed by US. And US is the largest trading partner of India. So just imagine your largest trading partner. You can't export a lot, but you're still exporting in record numbers. This is all because of FTAs India has signed.
So, we talk about, you brought up a couple of different interesting issues to me. One is this foreign direct investment, use FDI, coming into India. What sectors are those mostly concentrated in? What are these foreign companies investing in directly inside India?
So I would say a number of sectors. So there are a few traditional sectors which are labor intensive sectors, but the by far the biggest sector is electronics. If you look at the growth of the electronics sector, specifically mobile phones manufacturing, uh, over since 2014, the mobile phone exports from India have gone up by 287 times. 287 times growth in a decade. But in the next by next year, by this year, by the end of this year, every single iPhone used in sold in US will be manufactured in India. So there is tremendous FDI, for example, which Apple has brought in. And there are a number of other, basically almost every mobile manufacturer in the world is in India. Every electronics company is in India. Tremendous amount of FDI coming in over there. The other big sector is, I would say, is a bit more conventional sector, which is infrastructure. India needs a lot of it. There is a plan to invest about $2 trillion in infrastructure. So you basically have all the private equity, large private equity firms, for example, bringing in money into infra. So sectors like these are very big in terms of FDI.
So the other big sector you didn't mention is pharmaceuticals. India's been a big supplier of generic pharmaceuticals for a long time. President
Yeah.
Trump has, we'll say, encouraged the onshoring of these sort of products. Is that a problem for the FTA negotiations?
It's actually, I would say, a positive because President Trump wants to move away from dependence on China. That's his goal number one. And India very clearly, and it's not easy to move away. It's not easy to onshore all of that in US. So they would like to onshore all the branded drug manufacturing first. And the generics is where India gives an alternative to China and says that you can move from China to India and give a secure supply to US. So it's actually something good. And Ambassador Lighthizer has gone on public record saying that they will make a plan for securing supply chains in pharma, and they have taken a number of actions around it. And India is seen as a partner in doing that rather than a problem.
So you talked about supply chain risk associated with China. And of course, one of the big events that drove the discussion, at least amongst talking heads like us, about supply chain risk was COVID and the kinds of extreme measures that China took, and also the fact that people simply couldn't get uh, their supplies out of China for quite a long time. How big a deal was that for this migration of manufacturing from China to India?
I think there are two components to it. Uh, One is, of course, there is a China plus one strategy which every company has. And as part of that, companies brought a lot of manufacturing into India, and it is still growing. But also, India earned a lot of goodwill during COVID by exporting about 300 million vaccines to all over the world. So, whether it's Canada, whether it's Brazil, whether it's Europe, for example, India actually sent vaccines to more than 100 countries during COVID. So, it actually utilized that the pandemic to build goodwill. And I think that goodwill came in handy when it was negotiating trade agreements, when it was negotiating investments into India. So it benefited India a lot and it got them ready.
So let's switch a little bit to geopolitics. Um, One of the reasons for these 50% tariffs is India importing Russian oil, apparently. And India
Yeah,
has a long history of good relations with Russia. So,
yeah.
how do you see that relationship changing in the face of this economic pressure from the US, as well as India's move to trade more with developed countries?
So I think the President Putin was here in India earlier, and I think the relationship is very strong. The relationship is not just about oil export. It's a very multifaceted relationship. On the oil issue per se, if you look at the numbers, for example, the large private sector companies like Reliance have cut down imports by 50%. There is a tapering off of imports from Russia. So India does not see a problem of any relationship issue with Russia just because oil imports go down or up. And I think they'll be able to sort this issue out.
And has this issue not caused concerns from the EU countries, who, of course, are extremely worried about Russia's war machine on its eastern border?
No, I think if they're worried about the war machine, then they should stop importing gas from Russia. That's the first thing. They put their money where the mouth is. So I think India is equally concerned, and India is very actively participating in the Ukraine-Russia peace talks also. But I think Europeans are, I would say, frankly, a bit short-sighted on this, and they need to set their own house in order before talking about India.
So, one of the other issues is the relationship between US and India. A recent article just from days ago in Foreign Affairs magazine by Richard Fontaine, former guest on our podcast, CEO of Center for New American Security, talks about the decline of the relationship between US and India and between Modi and Trump personally. And says, are we destroying this relationship that we've been building for 30 years? So, how do you see that relationship evolving? Is it beyond repair, or is it being repaired, or what?
So let me just start by talking about how India looks at that relationship and looks at how what has happened between the countries. In India, if you speak to a lot of people in the government or even outside, uh, people are very happy that the relationship is the way it is, because in India we don't have a very strong opposition which pushes the government towards doing a few things or speeding up reforms. Trump is actually acting like an opposition party in India. It puts pressure on the Indian government to push reforms faster, which is where you see India has actually, as Prime Minister Modi says, gotten on board the reform express. And they have gone ahead with number of very path-breaking reforms, whether in terms of taxation, labor reforms, what have you. So the domestic implications of the TIF are slightly different from what people think it is. But otherwise, I think President Trump is a very hard person to read. He still says very openly that Prime Minister Modi is a very good friend of his. He's a good man. So I think the chemistry between the two remains. And the relationship is not just about trade. If you look at, for example, US and India recently held naval exercises in the Indian Ocean. So the defense cooperation is going on, defense procurement is going on. A number of things have been done off late. For example, there was an announcement of buying hydrocarbons, crude oil, and gas from US. Those agreements have been inked. There were some issues in America around digital taxation in India, digital services taxation in India, as it is called Google tax. India removed those taxes. So I think the relationship is much far wider. And if you just look at it from the narrow prism of the current trade deal, that will not be right. And the relationship remains strong. It can be stronger. And I think the countries are working on that.
So, traditionally, India was referred to, and this goes all the way back to the sort of Cold War era, even or the end of that, as a non-aligned country. And many people prefer other terms like multi-aligned or simply independent or autonomous. Um, but India does involve itself in bloc politics to some degree. And of course, the ones that are usually set alongside one another are, on one hand, the Quad with Japan, the US, and Australia, and on the other hand, the BRICS with Brazil, Russia, China, South Africa, and now several other countries. And because these appear to be two sides of the coin, it's easy for many of us to look at it and say India is kind of playing both sides. But from an Indian perspective, is that how India looks at these two groupings, or are they very different things in India's mind?
I think one thing to understand about India's history is when they consider you as a friend, they do not leave you irrespective of whether the weather is good or bad. That is the history of India. If you just look at their relationships with various countries, regarding looking at multiple blocks of countries, multiple groupings of countries. That's stated policy of India. Multilateralism is the predominant foreign policy pillar of India. And India does not see a contradiction in terms of, say, joining BRICS versus other groupings, and how BRICS will be perceived by US because of certain actions of BRICS. India believes that it can maintain the relationship with US while maintaining its place in BRICS and the role it plays over there. So, no contradiction as seen by India, at least. Uh, of course, analysts may have different views.
The other issue bilateral between U.S. and India is the H-1B visas, the visas that bring skilled workers to the U.S., especially in tech. And so many of these visas have been given to Indians because of your very excellent university system. Is this playing out domestically as a political issue, or are people confident they can still get the visas, or how's that going?
It's frankly speaking, the curbs on H-1B visa by US are a godsend for India. It's one of the best things which could happen to India because it can retain its talent, and a lot of people from US can come back to India. This is exactly what China did. They got the best talent from across the world to come back to China, and I think India needs to do that. So while in US may think that it's negative for India and they can hurt India by curbing H1B, it's actually the entirely reverse of that. So India does not negotiate when it's negotiating with US. It will never say increase H1B visas or make it easier. In fact, it will say the reverse. If it could say that, make it as tough as possible. We don't care.
So when you look at the Indian economy today, how would you categorize it, right? So India, as you mentioned, has a very low per capita GDP, so you still have a very large population of very poor people. But at the same time, have a burgeoning tech sector, a burgeoning pharmaceutical sector. You have advanced technologies coming in. You're playing in this advanced technology space. Uh, what is there any analog to what India is as an economy today, and what drives the Indian economy in 2026?
So you spoke about poverty. in your comments. I just want to give you the context. Over the last decade, more than 200 million people have come out of poverty in India. And all of these are then becoming the consuming class, which drives the Indian economy, for example. So you have this huge pyramid of people coming in from below, who are demanding services, who are demanding goods, which I would say is the bedrock of Indian economy. Indian economy has a lot of strength to be self-sufficient when required. So the demand is from within the country. A lot of the capital also which is required is now being generated from within the country. So for example, if you look at the stock market, foreign investors have been taking out money over the last 12 months, but it has not impacted the stock market significantly because domestic capital has come in. The domestic investors have a lot of faith in the Indian economy and they are pumping it forward. So that is what I think is driving the economy. The biggest driver is domestic demand, domestic capital, and then of course number of domestic opportunities which Indian startups are really utilizing. So if you look at, for example, the number of unicorns in US, the nationality of people who are starting the unicorns in US, the highest number, of course, is Americans, but the second highest is Indians. So Indians are starting up in US, but they are also starting up quite a bit in India. And I would envisage within a few years there'll be massive companies globally which will be then just started up in India and growing. So that all these are driving India's economy.
So you bring up an interesting point that India demographically is one of the few countries with a growing young population. It's got excellent university system, access to high tech, and yet investors are withdrawing funds. How do you account for that dichotomy?
That's on the stock market,
Yeah.
not really. FDI, as I mentioned, is going up, but the short-term money is going out, which is actually good for India. The short-term economy money or the speculative money is going out. That's partly because there are other avenues for growth. So, for example, the American tech sector or the American market is red hot. So there are investors who are taking money from India, putting that in US, which is okay. They may see opportunities and they can go there, but the key thing is that India is not dependent on foreign money for maintaining its market or for raising money. So, if you see, for example, over the last year, uh, India has had the highest number of IPOs in the world, highest, and they have been funded by domestic capital. While the foreign money was going out, it did not matter. Record IPOs one after another. The short term money will go wherever it sees short term profits, which is okay. The long term money is coming to India, and the good thing is domestic money, of course, is coming to India.
So let's talk about that a little bit. You obviously, I want to bring you into your wheelhouse with Bauer Group Asia and talk about the kinds of foreign companies who are coming to Bauer Group for advice on how to do business in India and where to do business, both geographically and in what sectors. Where are you seeing where are you seeing companies move in what places and sectors? And then where are you seeing in the future, where do you think future companies will want to go in? If you had to advise people, hey, these are the people who should see real growth opportunities in India.
Yeah. So I would say four big sectors where I see a lot of traction, and we are working with multiple companies. The biggest by far is technology. Uh, every single technology firm in the world is in India. If you look at, for example, OpenAI, if you look at Google Gemini, uh, all the AI engines are basically driving their growth from India. They are also I would say utilizing the data from India. If you have a billion users, and you can improve your platform quite rapidly. So a lot of tech companies coming to India, and a lot of traction I see in financial services. Banks are coming into India. For example, the Japanese investors have been very active lately. They have bought a few banks in India. American companies are aggressive, Europeans, a lot of these. Then you have manufacturing. As I mentioned Apple earlier, but a number of very large manufacturers from Europe, consumer good manufacturers, etc., are coming to India. Lastly, what Jim mentioned earlier, healthcare is a very hot sector. We see many companies bringing their technology to India, and what we see is, you bring the technology, you bring your know-how to India, but sometimes these companies don't know how to deal with the government. How to, because one big challenge in the way Indian government looks at companies is, it looks at Indian companies, domestic companies, with a certain lens. And when it looks at a foreign company, it will treat them the same way. But when it comes to, for example, data access, etc., it will have certain reservations in terms of sharing with the foreign companies. So you have to allay the fears of the Indian government and make sure that what I say is become the most Indian of the multinationals in India. So I think a lot of companies are trying for that, and we are helping them go through that journey.
All right, but that brings up the question of what are the barriers to entry as perceived by foreign investors, and it used to include, 'cause I'm dating myself, the so-called license Raj, where so many issues required the red seal and the red ribbon, and not just from the federal government, but from the state governments. Also, as
Yeah,
you mentioned, infrastructure needs improving, especially energy supply and transport.
yeah.
And finally, the question of supply of skilled labor. As so many companies are entering, that it's actually bidding up the cost of labor in the country. How do you see that going?
So I think to answer on all your points, the government, of course, is the ultimate arbiter and the capable institution in sorting out most of the issues you mentioned. The good thing is that India has a very competitive market, in the sense all the states compete with each other to get investments. And if you go to some of these states, the state chief minister will lock you in and ask you whatever you want, and will give you that, and only then you will be allowed to leave the state. Uh, so so you want something, you want land, you want capital, you want labor, you want it in a certain way, the state will actually roll out the red carpet and give you whatever is required. So a lot of the issues regarding ease of doing business are sorted because of that. But at a federal level, at a central level, government has taken a few steps to sort it. Labor was one of the big issues pending. India has come out with labor laws, a historic reform of labor laws, wherein earlier you could not hire and fire employees. So when you had, for example, a large company, you could only decrease the numbers after taking approval of the government. Now that has been waved away, and the power has been given to the state government to make the rules. And the state government, as I mentioned earlier, is dying to get investment. So if earlier you could only hire and fire up to 300 employees, a few states are now saying that we can increase the limit to 10,000 or whatever number you want. So a lot of the impediments around land, capital, labor are going away. It's not perfect right now, but most companies have either figured out a way around it, or the barriers have come down significantly.
All right. This is good time for an exit question. So we'll get you out of there on this one. Um, Getting a visa into India
Yeah.
is quite a journey. And I have applied twice. The first time required personal uh, involvement by my sponsoring organization in Mumbai. And the second time, I tried to use the e-visa function and it basically got back a denial with no explanation. Is this something that is common among your clients of people trying to get into India, or do they just not like me?
It's definitely you, Ray.
Okay.
But actually, I'm surprised that they denied the visa. And of course, ultimately, the state reserves the right to deny or give the visa based on their background checks. And you have to look back again, Ray, on your background. What have you done? But what I hear from people is e-visa facilities available. E-visa is a very easy thing to get. The website can probably be improved a bit, but most people I speak to are able to get the visas pretty easily. But it's definitely not case for a few people from China, for example. The Chinese citizens have a separate category, but otherwise, most of the other countries, it's pretty easy to get a visa. So I would say, Ray, just reapply and give me the details when you apply. I'll make sure some magic happens in the background.
Well, so it's great that you let me know that it is just me, and so I'm going to try not to take this too personally. But we do want to thank you. But personally, we do want to thank you for coming on the program today. This has been really interesting and really educational for us, and we hope for our audience.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Well, Jim, it's exciting to see India actually basically moving forward on these FTAs, these free trade agreements, because that's just not part of what we were used to India doing for so long.
You know, from my career in trade, seeing the country that was most closed opening up and seeing the country that was pushing for opening, mainly ours, closing is a little head spinning, but we're used to head spinning lately.
Well, in the US, we're kind of just going through a moment, I think, I hope, since I'm still at heart very much a free trader, and think that that generally is good for the American economy and for the world. But yeah,
Yeah.
it is definitely disorienting.
But, the points Anuj made that India is trying to open up, is trying to liberalize its bureaucracy, is trying to welcome foreign investment in one of the countries remaining that still have a demographic bulge is should be enticing to foreign investors,
Well, and of course, I mean, anytime you can count 1.4 billion people, you have to think that there's just so much human pot capital potential there, both
right?
from a market perspective and from a labor perspective.
Yeah, his point about, yeah, keep out those H-1Bs so we can keep them and exploit them, that's pretty good.
That was that was actually one of those answers I wasn't expecting, but I understand it.
Yeah, no, it actually shows there's a lot of potential in India and confidence in India about what the future holds.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, the thing that's always kept us foreigners out of doing business in India has been just sort of the infamous Indian bureaucracy, and it sounds like at least to some degree that bureaucracy is being tamed. I, any of us who have done business in Asia are very familiar with bureaucracies of sometimes inscrutable bureaucracies. One of my favorites, of course, was Vietnam, since I spent 3 years there. And in Vietnam, they have a word for regulations, which I grew so tired of hearing. And the word is quitting. Quitting is regulations, and I remember having a discussion once with a part of the Vietnamese intelligence community. We were trying to come up with some sharing arrangements, and I was sort of at the end of my rope as we were talking about some of the things, all the things we couldn't do. And he looks at me and he says, with this sort of, there look, and he says, Ray, in Vietnam, we have so many queting. And I said, yes, I know. But one of my favorite examples was I was out on the runway in Da Nang, uh, standing next to a couple of Vietnamese military officers in front of two old hangars, empty hangars that we, the United States, built back during the war years when, of course, we were, Vietnam, Da Nang was part of South Vietnam. But there was nothing in them. They were just empty. And we were going to bring in a cargo airplane and park it right in front of those hangars so that we could transfer some medical and engineering supplies for a humanitarian event that we were going to sponsor as the United States in a nearby province near Da Nang. And so we were going to bring this plane in. And so I'm standing there with these two military officers, and I say, now I'd just like to take a picture of this parking space so that we all know, where the plane is going to park, and I can communicate that to the crew. And they just shook their heads. No, I can't do it. And I said, but just to be clear, there's nothing here. And if you look across the runway there, that's Da Nang International Airport. So everybody standing in that terminal right now can look over and we can wave at them. So it's not like a secret where this is not I know what secrets are. This is not a secret. And they just shook their head and they say, Queeting, we have many Queeting. And so in the end, I was not able. And so as I was leaving, I said, you do realize that tomorrow I am going to get on the Vietnam Airlines flight flying back to Hanoi. I am going to sit on the left side of the airplane by the window and take a picture of everything on this side of the airport. And they just sort of shrugged their shoulders because they couldn't do anything about that. It wasn't a secret. It was just queasing.
It's a big difference.
So, well, we do want to remind everybody that Jim and Anuj are both employed by our sponsor, BowerGroupAsia, a strategic advisory firm that specializes in the Indo-Pacific. Of course, Bauer Group applies unmatched expertise and experience to help clients navigate the world's most complex and dynamic markets. And I would classify India as being both complex and dynamic and very large. And of course, as I mentioned, my co-host Jim Caruso is a senior advisor with Bauer Group. And you can visit their website if you want to go and find Anuj and Jim's faces there. You can go find them at BowerGroupAsia.com. And of course, we want to thank our producer, Ian Ellis Jones, and his company, IEJ Media, who puts these out. He is also the one that everybody likes to follow for his geopolitical and military graphics on X. You can go follow him at Ian Ellis Jones on X. And of course, if you liked this episode, please go subscribe and follow us at youtube.com at IP Podcast. Or you can follow us on your favorite audio streaming service or on social media. That would include X and LinkedIn and Facebook. Finally, you can email us at indopacificoutpodcast@gmail.com. That's indopacificpodcast@gmail.com. And of course, go and visit our sponsor, BowerGroupAsia.com. We thank you again for joining us. For Jim, I'm Ray, that's Ian, and we want you to join us next time on Why Should We Care About the Indo-Pacific?